All right. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Grow Up with Grow show. I'm Brett Schklar, your cruise director and managing partner here at Grow Powerful. There's a lot of marketing shows that are out there, and this is not one for the marketing teams. This is actually for the CEOs. This is for the chief revenue officers and for the VC partners that support their portfolio companies. And just a reminder, Grow is a team of battle-tested and proven fractional CMOs for the innovation economy. We've assembled some of the greatest growth minds and deliver them as a team of incredibly capable, as you'll find out today, and proven ICMOs or interim CMOs. So now on to our show and our special guest. The show is Defensive Marketing Strategies for CEOs in B2B Tech. And we are lucky to have Christina Del Villar along with us. Now, let's meet Christina. And one of these things that there's so much in here, I almost want to light a match and say it as fast as I possibly can, like my fraternity brothers made me do when I was hazing the fraternity, that I had to say the Greek alphabet before it went out. But
I won't
gosh,
haze you if you can't say it fast.
but you've got a lot of great experience, in the Fortune 500 world, early stage company world. You've got these companies who need to be investor ready. They need to have an exit to, help these companies reach the next stage of growth. And you cover some great industries, financial services, systems, education, nonprofit, obviously B2B technology, which is why we're all here, e-commerce, SaaS, can't go wrong with SaaS,
No.
agriculture, media, and entertainment. And, here we go. You are a professor, a mentor, an advisor. You're a member of the infamous Forbes Communication Council. You were head of marketing at Autodesk. You're the global head of marketing at Udacity. You're the head of marketing at Bill.com. You are marketing director at Wells Fargo, director of marketing at Oracle. I mean, this is some truly impressive shit, Christina. So, what do you have to say for yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. My motto, which if I didn't have my camera blurred, you'd see. My motto is actually "Do epic shit." So
There
this
you
fits
go.
in nicely, right? And I think for me, I've just been super lucky that I grew up in the Bay Area and just fell into a lot of the things that were happening in Silicon Valley, a lot of the startups. And then obviously there's some really well-established Fortune 500 companies there as well. And just been really lucky with my career. And I think that one of the things that sort of helped me sustain, my credibility and build upon that, and really sort of keep excited about what it was that I was doing, was just that I was keeping up with the technology and the different spaces that were coming up, and happening. Wasn't afraid to kind of take risks and
Mhm.
do some innovative things. So for me, that was just something that just allowed me to sort of expand and grow and try different industries and try different types of companies, and hopefully made an impact on all of them.
Nice. I love it. I love it. You know, um, One of the things we're going to talk about, today, the defensive marketing strategies for CEOs in B2B tech.
Yeah.
And the last couple of shows, not everyone, but the last couple of shows have really, I talk about the I word, right? Inflation. I talk about the
Right.
R word, the recession. I talk about the U word, the unemployment, or the L word,
Right.
layoffs. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And we keep diving into how do we help the CEOs think about marketing to set them up for success.
Right.
And I think you have definitely got the experience, and hearing you talk in the past and knowing what you're all about. By the way, we feel very fortunate to have you a part of the Grow Collective as
Yeah, I'm
one of
excited.
our more infamous ICMOs or interim CMOs.
Thank you.
But there's a theme here, and we're trying to help CEOs, think better, faster, stronger.
Right.
So before we dive into that, though, I have a personal question,
Yes.
just between us girls here, and that is, what is your superpower when it comes to marketing, when it comes to growth, when it comes to, working with companies?
Yeah, I think, besides doing epic shit, which I think is an amazing superpower to have. It's a little vague though. So for me, I think what again has made me successful in my 30 plus year career is really understanding what a company's strategy is or needs to be, so that I can then help the marketing organization, like you're saying, set the whole company up for success. So if you don't know what the strategy is, and a lot of companies don't, a lot of CEOs we've kind of lost track of what the actual strategy is. And if you
Mhm.
don't have that strategy, and it's short and long term, then it's really hard for marketing to be successful and for the company then to be successful. So really try to focus on that go-to-market strategy so that we can build everything on top of that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that go-to-market strategy, something I've seen that's very interesting is companies are now having go-to-market kickoffs at the beginning of every year instead of sales kickoffs at the beginning of every year.
Right?
Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing. So I just started teaching a new course literally today, Essentials of Marketing, and I was talking about strategy, right? Like how can you as a CEO or anybody in the organization really be successful? And how can you as a CEO or executive management team set your organization up to be successful if you really don't have a strategy? And like you can, in your mind, you can have a revenue target number, but that's not a strategy, that's a revenue target. And so how are you going to reach that revenue target? And again, maybe for that quarter, for that year, but you also have to think long term as well. It's really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think that is critical to think about that long term. And I think we'll dive into that today
Yep.
as we get juicy into this topic.
Yeah.
So let me ask you another thing, which is, what do you see being a winning formula for marketing leadership in 2023 in this post-apocalyptic,
Right.
world that
Post or
we're living
pre, I
at?
don't know if we're pre-apocalyptic. I don't even know
We're yeah,
anymore where we
yeah,
are.
we're pre-apocalyptic.
Pre
Yeah, that's
slash
true.
post.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that how can marketing set up the company for success? And I think that's part of it, but I also think that the executive team needs to set marketing up for success. And maybe it's a, catch 22 or, egg before the hen or whatever, chicken before the egg, any of those things you want to think about. But I really think that marketers, there's been a shift in how marketers have started to think about things and how they've sort of stepped up. And that's not necessarily to say that the rest of the world has recognized that, but I think it's important for to start with marketers and marketing leaders to understand this, and then kind of help other people understand. And that is that at the end of the day, marketing is the foundation of the company. They're the ones who are helping implement, develop, drive that strategy that we talked about, right? And so in order for that to make sense and manifest itself, marketers need to actually just own it, that they own revenue. Like at the end of the day, we own revenue. We don't own part of revenue. We don't own, we don't own we own revenue. That is our goal, is to make the company
Mhm.
successful and reach its targets, which is generally revenue. And so, and again, whether we do it like internally, like our own teams, this is what I do with my teams, like, okay, we own revenue and we have a stretch goal and we don't need to tell anybody else. But you do need to understand that pipeline and that revenue is what you're trying to develop at the end of the day, right? And in order to be effective at that, you really need to start understanding and owning data more. And that can
Mhm.
be, the technology stack that you own, because you need to help build the workflows that are going to lead you to the data that you need to be successful and understand. Or it could just be the data itself, or making sure you have a sales and marketing operations person on your team, whatever it is, you need to own and understand the data as well, because that again is going to help drive the success in whatever the pipeline and revenue targets are.
Yep. 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 Got it.
It's
Got it. I think
scary.
that's yeah, no, it is scary, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
It can
Yeah,
just be more disciplined. And I think that's what we're going to
exactly.
dive into today.
Yep.
So, before we really dive deep into that topic, the one other question I've got for you, we all are looking for the silver bullet, the new thing, the best new thing. So, and I know that you're probably learning a lot. I was a professor at University of Denver years
Nice.
back, adjunct professor, and really
Exactly.
enjoyed it. I learned a
It's
lot
great.
while I
Yeah.
taught. What is a marketing strategy you've learned about recently that you've seen it be effective?
So I think, and it's not necessarily new. I don't know that there's new technology, right? There's new ways of thinking about things. There's new ways of structuring things. So it's not necessarily new from that standpoint, but I have seen more organizations start implementing that. And that is really looking at customer marketing, right?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
work a lot with B2B, you do too, right? Like
Yep.
that is our thing. And if you think about it, like we spend all this time and money acquiring these customers, and then we're like, okay, peace out, good luck, I hope it works. We do the onboarding and then we're out, right?
Mhm.
And Especially in times of like downturns or recessions or uncertainty, when a lot of companies are not spending money, you have your customer base already. There's a lot of ways and a lot of techniques and tactics you can use to expand on those customers, right?
Yeah.
Making, you can measure your monthly active use, making sure that they're using it. Again, you want them you want your software to be the first thing they look at every morning. It's not going to be, but that's saved for like Gmail and Salesforce. But you want them to be looking at it on a daily basis. You want them to be using it as it was intended. You want them to learn and know all of the different features and functionality so that they're getting the most out of that product, because it's not just that you want them to use it, you also don't want them to churn. And so
Yeah.
you need to be thinking more strategically about those customers and how you can actually market to them.
There was a podcast I did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, called "Predictions Are Out, Preparations Are In," and it's along these same lines.
Yeah.
And number two was love the one you're with.
I like that. Yeah.
Here's the irony of that. That's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I think it
Sure.
was Stephen Stills that wrote that. And I talked about that, and then we launched the podcast, and the next day,
Yeah, Mr. Crosby.
yeah. So if
Yeah.
I was the cause of that, I really
Wow.
apologize to the universe. And
No, I think it was a coincidence, but
okay,
yeah.
okay. So let's
We
dive.
won't name any other famous
Yeah,
people then,
exactly,
just in case.
exactly. We'll name all the bad people.
There you go.
All right, so let's dive deep. Let's go into, if we had to pick 3, 4, 5, 6 defensive marketing strategies for the CEO
Yeah.
when it comes to B2B marketing and B2B technology marketing, what are they?
Yeah. So first off, it's important to think about like what is defensive marketing, right? And so the idea is, let's just say you're a market leader, or you're close to being a market leader, you're Avis and you're number two, whatever. How do you protect that market share, right? How do you, are there things that you do differently? Are there things that you double down on? I was listening to something the other day and they were like, why start something new when you can like double down on what you have, which is kind of similar to what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
One of the areas that I think is really critical, and again, I'm biased towards marketing, and I think that marketing as a function in an organization is absolutely critical. But regardless of whether it's marketing or not, when you start reducing your workforce, like this might get you to EBITDA, or it might get you to, certain other measurements, but you're not fooling anybody. It's not going to help you increase revenue, which again is your ultimate goal. And so you need to think about that. Like, you lay off 10,000 people, or even, whatever, 1%, 10, 5% of your workforce. How is it actually helping you? Right? That's
mhm,
something you need to think about. Now, a lot of companies use it as an opportunity to sort of think about strategically, like, yeah, we have too many in this area, we have too many in that area. And so from that standpoint, that's okay, but you probably want to be doing that all along, not just when times are bad, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think that CEOs really need to think about that. Like, why do we always go to reducing the workforce when there's concerns, right? Because what I see happening, and again, it doesn't matter if it's sales and marketing, which marketing is usually one of the first to be reduced, but then sometimes it's just all over the map. You actually lose momentum when you do that, right?
yeah,
And so if you're not doing it strategically, and again, you're doing it to sort of replace the fact that you haven't met your revenue numbers, it just impacts you negatively, and it takes so much longer to get back up to where you were, that it actually doesn't make sense to do it from that standpoint. So I'm going to stop there because I can see you.
yeah. And this is something I think is really important. I think we have to delineate, because we hear in the news, Google layoffs,
Right.
Meta layoffs, Microsoft layoffs. Twitter layoffs. And those are big companies. And those big companies, knew that they were going to grow to a point where they were going to, oversize, their eyes were bigger than their stomachs,
Right.
and then they were going to have to dial back.
Yep.
And that's just the nature of large company, expansion, contraction, and things like that.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk about the more emerging, right? The ones that
Yep.
aren't, those big people. And I think
Right.
that's where your sage advice really applies, that you don't have the time to lose momentum. You
Don't.
don't have, you're in a race, and the last thing you want to do is have the wind stop,
Right.
and not blowing your sails or doing whatever to your sails. I'm not a sailor,
Right.
but
I'm like, that's not how that works, but sure, let's go with it.
okay, sucking yourselves blue, whatever it is. But it's a very big difference, because we see this
Yeah.
stuff going on in big companies, and the
Yep.
big companies operate at a whole different level.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
for emerging B2B tech companies,
Yes.
losing any momentum when you may have a marketing team that's 2 people or 20 people or 30 people, every single person counts.
Right.
And that might have a short-term gain on your cash flow.
Right.
However, it has a long-term pain on the optics of the business, of the
Exactly.
outward facing activities, the
Yeah.
support for the sales initiatives, the overall revenue and growth program.
Right. And you're not fooling the investors.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're pretty smart,
exactly.
right? Like they can
Yeah.
say, well, you're still not reaching your revenue number, right?
Yeah.
So it might mean that you, again, you don't have a good strategy in place. It might mean that you have evolved. And so the people that you have working there don't have the skill set that you need. You might have a skills gap. And again, that's not to say that you want to keep that role, you want to keep that person, maybe you can retrain them, but you should be thinking about it again more strategically than like, okay, we need to get rid of 5% of our people, right? Because that's just
Yeah.
not. I read an article a long time ago about it takes like almost 12 to 24 months to regain that momentum, right?
Yeah.
And this is what I've seen so many times with emerging companies. They actually, once they reduce their workforce, they actually end up not being successful, not being able to maintain their business because they lost that momentum. They don't have 12 to 24 months to rebuild momentum. Google
Right.
does, right? Twitter
Right.
does,
Right.
Facebook
Right.
does. You
Right.
and I don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of other, smaller companies don't have that either. So again, before you reduce your workforce, and again, you might need to, reconsider like who you have on your staff and if that's the right thing to do. I think a lot of smaller organizations, and maybe they don't have a full-time CMO, which obviously it's fine if they have a fractional CMO or an interim CMO, but regardless of who you have and whether you have a VP of marketing, you really need to understand again that strategy and the skill set you need to implement that strategy at that given time, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to hire. And what I find, and I think it's nice, like it's a culture, like these are the people, these are the first employees that I've had, and this person was a general marketing person, or they started off as an SDR and now they're
Mhm.
VP of sales, and that's great. But you also, as a CEO and a leader, need to recognize when these folks, when you need to either up level them, upskill them, or replace them with different skill sets. Because again, so I'm not saying like don't switch out who you have. Just reducing your workforce in general is not the best solution. You do really need to understand though who is on your team, what they're bringing to the table, and how you can help them be more successful, or determine what skills you need to fill those gaps that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we talked about the workforce quite a bit, and how it,
Yep.
hurts more than it helps.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we talked lightly about, love the way, I mentioned the love the one you're
Lovely.
with. We
Yeah.
talked about the customers. There's more to the customer equation though, isn't there?
Yeah, and this goes right to defensive marketing, right? Like you're talking about your brand, you're talking about, your market share and the mind share that you have. So not and if there's emerging customers, right? So if you have a good customer base and you're continually trying to help them, either help them do better, help them recognize the benefits and value that your product or solution is bringing to them, help make them more successful, and it can be the end user or the company or the customer as a whole, it doesn't matter. But if you're able to uh, keep them engaged, keep them loyal, and then leverage them for, whether it's reviews or, recommendations. Even just them not churning is a critical component to that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like on the side of, churn. And then you have like, how can we leverage them in general to help expand internally, right? So if I've worked with organizations before where they might be using our products in one department when they potentially could be using us in 10, or they could be using us in their subsidiaries, or they're not using all of our functionality, or they're on pro versus, whatever the next level up
Mhm.
is, right? And so you need to think about that and see, are there areas that you can look at. You can look at the data and how they're using your product and determine. I've been in situations before where people are like sharing. You can tell that they're sharing the logins, or they're using more than they've actually purchased, or you're not considering them. This has happened to me when somebody comes to me like a month before it's time to renew, even though for the last 2 years I've trying to get help from them, and suddenly they show up and they're like, hey, it's time to renew, and I'm like, where were you the last 22 months when we actually needed
Right.
help, right?
Right.
So again, it goes to how
Hello,
you're thinking.
HubSpot.
Yeah, I was going to say Marketo, but whatever. It's not important, really. You get the point. But again, like, how are you thinking about your customers? How, are they loyal to you? How can
Mhm.
you leverage them to expand market share, and especially in times of, potential, again, reduction in,
Yep.
the we don't know, we don't really know, like, are we in a recession or not, what a downturns, and people are just cautious. But your customers are going to be able to sell your product much better than your salespeople, just because they're looking at their peers. They're trying to get a better sense of like, I'm putting myself on the line by investing in this solution, and they want some affirmation, and their colleague can help them with that. So there's a lot of ways that you can really help your customer, and that they will, and then in turn help you again with that expansion, with lower churn, and then also with just the whole idea of that defensive marketing,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep. So what other ideas do we have as far as defensive marketing strategies?
yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's really, there's a lot of things that you can think about. And again, I do think that really understanding your customer is important. But one of the things that I think is critical, and it's kind of right up there with knowing your strategy, is really understanding that customer journey. And I'm not talking about just the, okay, top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, now let's onboard. I'm on the board of directors for Griffith Observatory, and we were working on our strategy. It's a go-to-market strategy for the next 8 years. And I was like, okay, well, what's the customer journey? And they were like, okay, well, they sign up for, they become a member and then they come to a show. And I'm like, oh, or when they're a kid, they visit, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the first one. Then when they're in the 5th grade, they actually do a class at the observatory.
Mhm.
Then maybe they kind of skip the next 20 years until they, have a hot date and want to go up at sunset to Griffith Observatory. This is a true fact.
That's
And then you're like, how do you engage them, right? And then they become members, and then that you want them to put Griffith Observatory in their estate. So this is like a 70-year journey.
right.
I mean, this is an extreme case. I get that, but like, what are these different pinpoints in different areas that you have the opportunity to engage with them? And B2B is very similar, right? You have that entire buyer journey where you're looking at, they say there's like 17 to 25 different people involved in B2B purchases these
Mhm.
days. And so you can't just think of it as like the end user, like who else is involved? When do they come in and out of that customer journey? And by thinking about that, again, it goes to how you can market them, but it also helps you build a better product, have happier customers, which again helps with that retention.
Right.
And then just kind of word of mouth, like that really should help increase with your market share, the mindset that you have with other folks. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's a fear. I love that you're bringing up the need to understand that customer buyer journey,
yeah.
and there's so much fear right now. And I'll give you an example. And maybe I haven't seen it so much on the enterprise side, but on a lot of SaaS products, a lot of cloud-based apps and solutions, they operate almost more like a consumer product than they do a B2B product, right? An
Yeah.
individual can evaluate something. They might have the purchase authority up to a certain level,
Right.
all of those things. Something I've seen recently as companies are retrenching and trying to hold on to revenue as quickly as possible, and it frustrates the hell out of me, is technologies are now only offering a 7-day free trial versus the
Yeah.
14 or 21
30.
or
Yeah.
30-day trial.
Yeah.
And it's been a big switch. And I'm a huge fan of looking at newer and more innovative technologies. And I'm always rooting for for the not big person to, to try to, put some money towards. But
Yeah.
I've seen this so many times just since beginning of the year. Things that were
Interesting.
normally 30-day, trials or 30-day free trial or limited 30-day trial or something is now 7 days. And it's not
Right.
enough time to sink my teeth into it. And if
Right.
these companies took the time to understand their buyers and
Yeah.
their buyer journey versus, forcing the sales process because of a fear-based approach, they
Right.
probably would do a lot better. There's several technologies that I would have probably gotten a little bit more intimate with and gotten addicted to it, which,
Right.
let's face it, SaaS, for the those types of transactional SaaS solutions are gateway drugs, right? They give you a
Right.
little bit, they get you hooked, and then they get you locked in. They're not
Yeah.
even giving you enough time to actually feel the high.
Right.
It's really not understanding that buyer journey of the customer.
Right. So they're these, and I totally get what you're saying. They're not, you as the person doing the trial, you never get to the aha moment because you
Right.
don't have enough time. So that's one issue. The other thing, and we had a lot of insight into our product when I was at Autodesk, and I was like, why aren't these converting, right? Like, these are the right people, we're giving them the right tools, we didn't limit their didn't limit their trial. But there was, and I'm like, what is happening? So what we found was they were going through and they had to do, like, 5 or 6 steps, right? And they would get through to the 4th step, and the 4th step was to then add a reviewer, which was almost always their manager, just by the nature of the system. And you could tell they were like, oh, no way. I'm like, no, I don't even want them knowing I'm doing this shit right now, right? They'll be like, why aren't you doing your job? Why are you doing this trial, right? And so you could tell they were like, no. So what we did was we made a video and included it at that point that basically gave them all of the talking points they would need to explain to their manager what they were doing, why this was critical, and what it would mean by them adding them to this thing. And we literally increased conversion by, I don't even, it was like insane.
Mhm.
But if you're not thinking about that buyer journey and you're not looking at it from that standpoint, we would have just kept, losing all these people who literally had spent 14, 15 days in this trial. So
Yep.
you gotta look at that.
Yep. So I know we're sort of heading into the edge of our time here.
Yeah. Okay.
And are there other defensive strategies you think are important? What are some of the key takeaways here?
Yeah.
CEO, this is for CEOs and VCs and chief revenue officers, people who have very short attention spans.
Right.
So let's,
Yeah.
so what
So
are the key
I
takeaways?
will concisely say, I think organizations, especially B2B, need to think about account-based marketing.
Mhm.
It's always like a minus with CFOs and then the CEOs, because it's really expensive per lead or per generated qualified lead, customer, whatever you want to think about. But at the end of the day, if you are doing it right, you are targeting and marketing to the right customer. The sales cycle should be reduced, and the value of that customer and customer value, long-term customer value, should increase. So you should really consider it. Again, the CAC might seem like it's crazy initially, but it really is valuable at the
CAC
end of the
being
day.
customer advisory,
Sorry,
or
customer
customer acquisition
acquisition
costs.
costs.
Yep, yep, yep,
Sorry. Yep.
yep. That's good.
So I think that's really critical. And like we said a couple of times, like, you really do need to understand your customers, right?
Yep.
And that journey, and why they're there, so that you can retain them and leverage them to truly understand, like, what that defensive marketing strategy might even look like, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
So
awesome.
one last question before we
Yep.
wrap up, and forgive me for going off script here a little bit, but let's say somebody said, I really like what Christina had to say,
Yeah.
and I think she'd be a good fit to help us out on an interim basis. Where would you start? What would be the
Oh,
first thing you would want
yeah.
to do if you had a CEO held captive?
So generally what I do, I have a process that I go through, and the first thing is to really help whoever's going to be involved in this process understand what this process is, right? You need to set expectations with them, how much time I'm going to need from them, what I'm going to need access to, what kind of data I'm looking for, how long it's going to take, other people I might need involved, and like what types of recommendations they're going to end up with at the end of the day. I also need their commitment that they are going to follow through with this process,
Mhm.
and it's tough. Like at the end of the day, like if you don't implement what I recommend, like there's not a lot I can do about that, but I would
Right.
highly recommend that you do. And so that's part of it. And then the second piece is really either helping, I do like go-to-market strategy audits, which generally turn into like just developing go-to-market strategies,
Mhm.
because that's super key. So then we'll focus on that a little bit. And then we'll focus on how to actually build out the different plans and tactics to help implement and drive that strategy. So that's kind of the process that I take.
Got it. Got it. No, I love that. And I think that would be a very sage process. As we're thinking through this, as we're talking about defensive marketing strategies, it's really the way we're talking about it's not really defensive.
No,
It's actually
it's,
more thoughtful, more planned.
yeah,
And the reason why I say that is this is the time, this is you and I have been through a couple of these, the dot-com bust, and
yep,
we've been through, the 2007, 2008, 2009. This is another one of those cycles.
yep,
And this is where those little companies become the big companies.
right,
The big companies are retrenching, they're getting rid of people, everybody's out for themselves, they are a
yeah,
bunch of career corporate ladder climbers, and it's a bunch of chaos.
yeah,
And the smaller companies, the ones that are emerging, need to emerge. It's time
yes,
to emerge. And
yeah,
I call it the Rockefeller effect. I don't know if that's a real term or not, but this is when the steel, the Rockefellers became rich is during the downturn.
yep,
And that's what you're really suggesting here. So I
yeah.
think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think, now's the time to be innovative and take those risks. And
Yep.
honestly, your investors, if you tell them like, look, we have an opportunity here. This is what we're going to do. This is what we hope to achieve. And yeah, it's a risk, and the other thing, I think there's a lot of opportunity to start picking up a lot of those people who were laid off. They're super
Yeah.
smart.
Yep.
They're amazing. And just because it didn't fit where they were, I would take advantage of bringing some of those folks on, whether they're engineers or sales or product or marketing leader. I don't care. Like there's
Yep.
some good people out there right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's a good place to really end is that there are great people. There is an opportunity to really swoop up into the right
Yep.
with, results if you stay focused and don't let yourself get behind.
Yeah.
So that's really it. That's the show, defensive marketing strategies for CEOs and B2B technology. Christina, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
You clearly do epic shit. And I love it.
I think it's fun.
So how besides the Grow Powerful website,
Yes.
growpowerful.io, how else
Yes.
can people find you?
You can find me at ChristinaDelVR.com and then also on LinkedIn, which is Christina Del Villar there as well. So
Perfect. Love it.
yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, if you like this show, be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this. Visit us at growpowerful.io. You'll see Christina and all of her amazingness there. You can subscribe to our blog. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on LinkedIn. You can search for us on YouTube. Oh, and if you are a fractional CMO, join our community, Fracmo. It's open to all who want to learn, share, and grow in the everything fractional CMO world. Thank you and have a fantastic day.